from anxiety to empathy. Our need for each other is not an obstacle to overcome, but a virtue to be celebrated. Robert Allen. We know how anxiety is related to stress, but less understood is how empathy can turn off the stress response. We know that emotions are the result of certain ways of thinking. Once these emotions develop, especially negative emotions, they need to be released because trapped emotions can cause a lot of tension and stress. As we've discussed, when the stress response turns on, sometimes the logical mind disappears and the lizard brain takes over. I don't know many lizards with deep, meaningful relationships. Lizard brains tend to make decisions in relationships that create even more tension, problems, hurt feelings, and stress. Empathic listening releases trapped emotions, validates people, and creates atmospheres for positive relationships and far less stress. The paradigm of anxiety in relationships is this: I need to intervene, but I might not know what to do. I need to solve this person's problems. I need to fix this person. I need to take control. The empathy paradigm is this: I need to understand how this person feels. That's the best thing I can do right now. I don't need to fix anything. I don't need to control. My job is to just listen. Simply understanding and allowing this person to be heard is the most important thing. The root of most relationship problems is the feeling that I'm not understood. In almost every relationship where there's an obvious conflict, you'll almost always notice that the people involved are not trying to understand the other people involved. They're more invested in getting across their own point of view, explaining their own problems and concerns. When you actively try to understand other people, respecting their frame of reference and uniqueness, you give them the freedom to say what they really think and feel. This affirms them and fosters trust in the relationship. It also gives them the chance to release stored up emotional tension in a safe environment. When that happens, they can solve their problems on their own. Most people do not want you to fix, advise, or judge them. They want you to listen and understand what they feel. When they feel they are understood, they feel empowered to do what they need to do and move on. But most of us have little training on how to listen. Most people merely listen with the intent to reply. As a result, they do not develop positive connections with others. Empathy fosters relationships and reduces social stress. It is an active listening that helps a person feel understood and validated. Getting to a place where you are listening empathically involves a focus on mindfulness. In order to understand how someone is feeling, you have to be focused on the present moment, here and now. Autobiographical listening implies that you aren't present. This type of listening invariably takes your thoughts into your own past and compares that with what is being said to you now. Usually, this frustrates the person who wants to be heard, which commonly results in tension and anxiety. There are 4 steps involved in listening empathically. Mastery of one moves you to the next. Step 4 combines the first 3 steps. Practice with each step until you're comfortable with it, and then move to the next one. And be patient. You probably won't be very skilled at first. Allow yourself to make mistakes. This type of listening takes practice. Step 1. Mimic the content of the communication. Simply repeat back to the speaker exactly what is said. For example, if someone says, "I like my job, but I don't feel challenged," you would say, "You like your job, but you don't feel challenged." To mimic, just listen and repeat verbatim what is said. But be careful here, you don't want to sound like a callous parrot. So make sure your voice intonation and body language show that you are interested and concerned. The way to do that is to really be interested and concerned. Do this cautiously. You're just getting warmed up with this step. Generally, what you'll notice when you listen this way is that the person speaking will recognize that you are really interested and listening. Hopefully, she will want to continue sharing her feelings with you. Step 2. Rephrase the content. This time, you put the speaker's meaning in your own words. This takes more thought on your part. For example, the other person says, "I'm very concerned about my son. I don't think he's doing as well as he could be doing academically." To rephrase the content, you might respond, "You're worried your son isn't doing well in school." Rather than saying what she said verbatim, you say it back to her using different words than she said, while making sure you mean the same thing she meant. It's usually best to do this with a much shorter version of what she said. Don't try to read more into it than she said. You're simply opening the gate, giving her psychological freedom to continue speaking. Step 3. Reflect feeling. Here, you listen and look for the emotion behind the words, observing facial expression, body language, and voice. For example, if the person says, "I talked with my supervisor about how I could get a raise. I just wanted to know the criteria they use in giving raises, and she got mad and jumped all over me. I can't work for a woman like that." Reflecting the emotional content, you might say, "You're upset and angry. You feel like you are misunderstood." In this step, you're doing your best to reflect back what the person is feeling. You may not always get it right, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. When you try to reflect feeling, your friend is going to sense that you are in his world, listening, understanding, and being mindful. Step 4. Rephrase the content and reflect the feeling. You put both the speaker's verbal meaning and emotional content in your own words. For example, with regard to the last expression, you might say, "It hurts," that's the emotion, "when you get reprimanded for seeking information," that's the content. You're not agreeing or disagreeing with the person. You're only attempting to reflect your understanding of what the other person says and feels. This 4th step is ultimately listening with empathy. You're combining steps 2 and 3. You're responding like an emotional mirror. You're reflecting back the content and feelings of what he or she is saying. And you're not adding anything more to it. A mirror only reflects what is in front of it. This is the case when you listen empathically. Empathy diffuses emotional energy and helps others get emotional tension off their chest. Many stressful interactions filled with defensiveness, guilt, blame, and frustration are often dissolved as both parties begin to trust each other enough to open the doors for more open and honest communication. Please remember, however, that when you listen with empathy, people are vulnerable as they share personal feelings with you. It is your responsibility to have integrity and honor the privacy and obligation of these communications. An example of empathic listening. A student in one of my wife's health courses shared the following story with her in her class. I've tried to make it as close to her words to the class as possible. I was substituting at a local elementary school. Before I went to class, I was warned by almost everyone about a girl who would make my life hell that day. She had a lot of behavior problems and often tried to get attention by doing disruptive things. When I went to class, I found out they were right. This 5th grader was trouble all day. I tried everything they taught us in our education classes on how to manage these types of situations, but nothing worked. I was about to send her to the principal's office when I thought about what we learned in class. I figured I had nothing to lose. I got the class working on an assignment, and I told her to meet me on the porch of the portable we were in. She came out defensive, knowing she was in trouble. When we got out there, I had no idea what to do. So we just sat there for quite a while. Finally, I said something like, "It's frustrating when you don't really want to be in school." She just looked at me and didn't say anything. We stayed there for a long time, and I was beginning to worry about the other kids in the classroom. But I just kept sitting out there with her. Finally, I think she realized I was serious about listening to her. After some small talk, she loosened up and told me that her parents were getting a divorce and it was her fault. The first thing I wanted to do was to say that it wasn't her fault. But I remembered that would squash her trust in me. I was there to listen. So I said something like, "That must be a heavy burden to carry." She started to cry, and she poured out her heart to me for the next 10 minutes. I tried to keep listening empathically. I guess I was the first person who did not tell her that her feelings were wrong, that she shouldn't feel the way she did. She told me I was the first person who had really listened to her. After that, she was the model student. She was happy the rest of the day. She even stayed in from recess to help me clean up the classroom. She was a really wonderful little girl who was going through a really difficult situation and needed someone to really listen to her and just validate how she was feeling. I think inside she understood that the divorce wasn't her fault, but she felt out of control and helpless, and that is just how it came out. I realized the power that real listening can have. I didn't have to do anything. As young as she was, she knew the answers. She just needed someone to listen without judging her. That is how powerful empathic listening can be. Ever wonder why the things that irritate you seem to get worse? Find out why what you resist persists in the next video, From Resistance to Unruffled.